if you have a fire lit in something that you're truly interested in, you don't let someone else's narrow thinking stop you. You just figure out how to ask better questions. So share a bit of that story.
So the year is 1993. I have two buddies of mine, Byron Lichtenberg, who was an astronaut, Ray Cronise, who was at NASA Huntsville, and they had been just bragging and having a blast flying on NASA's zero-G airplane. And I'm like, how can I get on? And I'm like, I can volunteer this way, volunteer that way. I wanted to experience weightlessness. The only way to experience weightlessness without going in a rocket to orbit was on a parabolic flight. It's a flight that is basically a giant roller coaster, 50 degrees nose up, push over the top. And as you're going over the top, you're going on a little bit of an arc of an orbit, and you're weightless for roughly 30 seconds. And try as I might, I couldn't make it happen. So I'm like, first question is like, if I want to do it that much, there must be a market. I'm going to start a company.
Well, you're probably the first person I really took seriously about 10 years ago, speaking about AI, quantum computing, abundance, the future of the world. It's all, I know your outlook is positive on it. And right here we are in the middle of, probably the biggest shakeup since with the internet, with all the new AI.
I would say the biggest shakeup since everything. And we are in the middle of it. It's happening right now. It's like we're at the 99th level of the gameplay.
It's wild to me how we spoke about AI forever. And I guess there were elements of AI and some of the things that we did, but all of a sudden, essentially ChatGPT comes onto the scene. And for me, it was definitely the first thing that someone said in a WhatsApp group, you guys should really try this. And I was like, well, I trust these people, but this is weird. The last thing I tried sort of that was really brand new to me was cryptocurrency stuff and NFTs. And honestly, Peter, I felt like that turned me off of a lot of things because it seems like the evolution of the internet has been sort of Microsoft Word. Someone probably created it before that, but like this Microsoft Word, ability to navigate anything you wanted to do. And as long as you knew how the file, edit, whatever menu toolbar, you could use it. And then I get into NFTs and cryptocurrency, and I cannot figure anything out. It is like a completely different language. Then someone serves me up ChatGPT and I just write a sentence. And actually the first thing I asked it to do was to write a college entrance exam essay that appealed to a liberal point of view from a conservative's viewpoint, and it blew my freaking mind.
Yeah.
So tell me where you think we're at and what you're excited about.
You know what's going on there. I call it user interfaces, and user interface moments are these inflection points where everything changes, where things become easy and beautiful. And my favorite term is automagical. Like it feels automatic. It feels magical. And, NFTs never got there. Cryptocurrencies, I mean, Coinbase does it a little bit, but it just makes it a little bit easier to interface with. But ChatGPT took a very complicated capability and put a user interface on it that made it just brain dead easy to utilize. And we've seen that before. We saw that with the Mosaic browser. Right. So Mark Andreessen comes up with Mosaic as an interface to the internet. Right. DARPA and ARPA and all of that had created this large, national and global network for exchanging information on computers. But you had Baroque terminology to be able to, for file sharing and transfer. And then Mosaic comes along and then Internet Explorer, and it becomes super easy. And then, of course, Jobs does it with the iPhone and the App Store, and these moments in time where things become super easy and obvious to use, and ChatGPT did that as well. So that's what you were feeling in that moment.
I got it. So is there a reason why no one has created that user interface yet for NFTs and some of that stuff?
I honestly have seen some variations of it, but when you get the product market fit and things explode, and ChatGPT is a perfect example of that because it was so wow. It went from 0 to 1 million users in 5 days and to 100 million users in 2 months. I mean, talk about raving fans, right? I mean, who would not love to see their product or program just explode onto the scene that way? Uh, so these things have to be done, but it not only has to be easy, there has to be a utility behind it. So NFTs, have some potential utility, and I have friends who love it and are excited about it and so forth. And other times it's gimmicky, but not to over-index on NFTs. We're going to see a lot of cool user interfaces, and you know what the ultimate user interface is? It's AI. Um, when you're able to speak to your own version of Jarvis, right, from Iron Man, and say, "Listen, I want a 3D print like something to hold my coffee in the morning, and I'd like it to be the size of my hand, and I'd like it to, be insulated so it is able to keep the heat in. And would you color it black with a silver lining?" And you just speak to this thing, and in your augmented reality vision pops up a 3D image of what you're looking. You say, "Yeah, cool. How much would that cost to make?" And it says, 17 cents. You go, "That's it. Please manufacture for me." Right? You know nothing about material sciences. You know nothing about 3D printing tool paths, but you know what you want, and you can see whether it matches, and you can say, "Just make it." Right? That's another ultimate user interface. And so I've written about that and spoken about that. AI is the ultimate user interface moment to everything. And so as we see these large language models continue to evolve and mature, we're going to see our power in the world, as parents, as entrepreneurs, as explorers, continue to increase, where there's nothing you can't do, right? Ultimately, you'll hop into an F-35 fighter jet, which you have no idea how to fly, and you'll sit in the seat and you'll say to your own version of Jarvis, "Would you please take off and climb to 30,000 feet?" And it will take care of everything else, all the other things along the way, right? So those are user interfaces that are coming our way.
So AI eventually will be the great combinator of everything, where we can just talk to it, excuse me, and it'll sort of interface between everything. That's fascinating. The first time I ever experienced VR and AR, both were with you. I remember the Samsung VR headset that used sort of the Samsung phone was the first one I'd ever seen. And then when we were at MIT one time, I think it was in the Boston area, we were doing a X Prize trip, and I tried the Microsoft HoloLens, which was clunky at best, but we now are getting to some different versions of it. I've heard still, the Apple Vision Pro just comes out. I've heard it's overhyped, and I've seen quite a few people say, "No, wait a second. The way it locks some things and made it like there's something about this that may be the future of what this is going to look like." What's your take on that?
So, full disclosure, I've got mine coming. I don't have it yet. Uh, and everything I'm reading it is something different. Uh, so the reality is we're going to see a brand new set of visual interfaces. In the Apple Vision Pro is still large, still heavy, still power hungry, and that will need to get fixed. But we're going to be living life with a screen in front of our eyes until we get, full on BCI, brain computer interface, that bypasses all of that. Can't wait. There was a poll done, I saw it the other day, about whether people asking, would you get your brain implant done after Elon's Neuralink did their first human trial? And by the way, I'm going to have the surgeon who did that speaking at the Abundance Summit this
Nice.
March. Anyway, long story short, we are going to be living in a world that is augmented. All of our senses are augmented all the time, because we get so much information from it, and we get so much freedom and so much ease. Right? Again, I use that term automagical, where I look at you and I remember your birth date, your kids' names, your last conversation we had. And what's interesting is we're going to give our AIs approval or permission to listen to every conversation we have, read every email, see through the augmented reality, forward-looking cameras on our glass. Because when you do that, it just helps so much, right? I mean, I'm awful at names, and I would love my AI to be reminding me. At my Abundance Summit, I've got the first name on name tag so large so that it can help me remember who the person is coming at me with their hand outstretched, from across the room. And and people say, are you really going to give up such privacy, giving your AI access to so much? And listen, OpenAI, when you're doing your ChatGPT queries, has access to that information. I won't say her name, but Alexa, who's sitting on the table over there, I don't want her to wake up, listens to your conversations in the bedroom if it's there. You know, uh, Google sees your emails. I mean, you already are fully out there all the time. So why not have your AI be there reminding you of the last conversation, and basically telling you, listen, don't eat that on your plate. Your glucose level is already sky high, and instead have the olive oil over there on the table. It's a personal coach, it's a personal assistant, it's personal everything all the time. So you can turn it off, but I don't think people will.
You also are a big advocate for privacy. So how do you think this should work?
Well, I mean, listen, I think everybody is an advocate for privacy, and I don't think it exists. Um, I think that we have the illusion of privacy. I think I would call it respect versus privacy. In other words, systems um, respect your privacy, but innately the data is there, right? AIs can read lips from across the room, across the street. We're leaking and dribbling information all the time. Your cell phone signal, your car signal, all of these things are being tracked by the various platforms. Now, whether or not that's used and abused, I don't. Um, I don't fool myself with the notion that privacy is that I can live a private life and live a technological life. You can live a private life if you give it all up and walk into the woods, sure, but you're trading a lot. So there's always a trade for one thing versus another. And I think privacy is a relatively new concept. I don't think privacy really existed uh, over the ages in different cultures and humanity. But anyway, that's how I think about it.
Dig it. So I think you'll get your degrees right. I want everyone to know, you're in an interesting place to qualify to talk about a lot of things. You have a degree from MIT in, I think, biology and physics. You have a master's from MIT in aeronautics and aerospace, and then an MD from Harvard. And one of the things that I think is interesting that leads into all this is the education system. We are in a really unique place in the education system. I know you've got two young boys. They're not nearly as young as the last time I saw them. What do you think about what's going on in education now, and
I think we're
what do you think we need to
screwed.
do?
I think we're screwed. I think the education system is failing our children um, in so many different ways. I just recently gave a talk to my kids' high school and middle school faculty, and I asked the question first off: how many of you believe that the world was better off 40 or 50 years ago? Two-thirds of the room raised their hand, right? And then I asked, how many of you think that the future of our children will be better than today? And like two people raised their hands. And I was like, oh my God. And these are the people who are influencing our kids. And I think that would be true for the majority uh, of all school teachers out there. And the reality is, and you know this, my book, uh, Abundance, The Future is Better Than You Think. My next book coming out probably end of this year, beginning of next, is called The Age of Abundance. And it is a follow on to that original book. And the data is incontrovertible that over the last 30 years, 100 years, 200 years, um, things have gotten better on so many levels that it's almost like it blows your mind. Global violence is way down, deaths due to warfare, access to democracies, the right to vote is way up. child mortality has plummeted. Extreme poverty in the world has plummeted. Access to energy, comms and internet, water, sanitation, food calories, high quality protein, all these things are up and to the right. And I think the challenge is that we're so bombarded by negative news all the time. And like, I don't watch the news. You couldn't pay me enough money to turn on, Fox or the Crisis News Network, my pet term for CNN. And because, what are they going to show me? Nothing that I can't get in 10 seconds of reading a Google news summary, but being fed every murder on the planet over and over and over again in living color on every news cycle just is not what I need to color my mindset with. And the reality is the news media delivers 10-to-1 negative to positive news. And that's just not the way the world is. That's the way they selectively feed you, because we pay so much more attention to negative news, and it glues us to the TV set and connects our eyeballs to their advertisers. And so it's a business model for them. We're negative news addicts. And when you realize that, I'll give people a challenge. If you get the newspaper, I don't. Again, I curate my news. It's not like I don't know what's going on in the world. If something is really going on I need to know about, my mom will tell me. But at the end of the day, I am cautious about what I let into my mind, in the same way that focusing on health, I'm cautious about what I eat. And having some editor or some producer choose all the stories, like I'm in LA and we've had this rain the last few days, and it was like one in a millennium storm, the atmospheric river, and it's like, okay, it's raining, yes, but honestly, anyway.
Yeah, it's not doing that much. So the old education system you and I went through was based on rote memorization. Not, I mean, there were amounts of critical thinking. Certainly, for me in law school, they would present you the case, you'd make an argument, all these things. What do you think? At the lowest levels and at the highest levels, what do you think we should be shifting toward? Because I know there's a lot of schools that are like, you may not use ChatGPT, which I understand what they're trying to protect against, but I think they're using the wrong method to protect against it. I'd love to know where you think we should be heading there.
Yeah, so really important. I do believe that our schools are not preparing for the future. I think that um, the most important things for our kids are going to be, number one, to help them find their purpose in life, what lights them up, and the lesson that they can make a career out of anything. But if they're self-driven, if the intrinsic motivation is there, if they connect with something, for me, Nick, as you know, I mean, you did a beautiful documentary about me and Visioneer, and I'm so proud of it. It was the Apollo program and Star Trek that got me lit on fire, and everything I did was a result of my own motivation to want to go and pursue that career. So, long story short, we need school systems to help kids explore and find their passion. We need school systems to help them learn to ask great questions, to be critical thinkers, to be leaders, to be able to, I think it's more debate and philosophy to some degree, but we also need to shape their mindsets. One of the things I speak about a lot, and I'll digress a moment because I think it's that important. If I asked you what made the greatest leaders on the planet succeed, Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, you name your leader du jour. And I said, was it the money they had? Was it the tech they had? Was it their friends? Or was it their mindset that enabled them to succeed? I think, 90% of people say it would be their mindset. And they would be right. And if you took away everything from them but retained their mindset, they would probably regain their success. And so if mindset is that critically important, then the next question to ask is, what mindset do you have? And where did you get it? And what mindset do you need for the decade ahead? And I think we should be teaching those mindsets proactively. and you shape your mindset in the same way that an AI shapes a neural net by showing it evidence after evidence after evidence after evidence to shape that mindset. And if you're feeding somebody murder after murder on news every night, your mindset is one of fear and scarcity, which is our default mindset from evolving on the savannas of Africa over the last few 100,000 years. But the mindsets I'm focused on that I teach are ones of gratitude, of curiosity, an abundance mindset that every year brings more and more opportunities, a longevity mindset, which is a passion, an exponential mindset, a moonshot mindset. And so I think mindsets are what we need to teach our kids. And then finally, they need to understand what the technologies of today are going to be enabling for them. And this is computation, sensors, networks, AI, robotics, 3D printing, synthetic biology, AR, VR, blockchain. These are the technologies that are shaping our world with, you know, like a tsunami coming our way. And if our kids don't understand what these things are, what they're capable of, and how to think about utilizing them, they're just moving way, way behind.
Yeah, go in the wrong direction. You, as you mentioned, and we cover it extensively in the movie Visioneer. You guys can check that out on Amazon or other places you watch documentaries. But you were enamored by the Apollo program. So space lit your fire. One of the things that people may or may not know, but we'll quickly go over it. You created the X Prize, which is now a foundation, but the first X Prize was to create private space flight, essentially, suborbital flights that you wanted to lead into bigger and better things because you wanted to go to space. One of the things that we talk a lot about in this podcast is, a better life. Everything in life it gets better by asking better questions. Uh, as long as there's not someone over the top of you, perhaps like a teacher or a headmaster, who won't put up with your questions. But in the normal scheme of life, one of my favorite stories you tell is when you got the 0G plane, when you got that approved through the FAA. Tell me about some of the questions you had to ask, and tell us a little bit about that story, because I think it really hits to the point of if you have a fire lit and something that you're truly interested in, you don't let someone else's narrow thinking stop you. You just figure out how to ask better questions. So share a bit of that story.
Sure. So the year is 1993. I have two buddies of mine, Byron Lichtenberg, who was an astronaut, Ray Cronise, who was at NASA Huntsville, and they had been just bragging and having a blast flying on NASA's zero-G airplane. And I'm like, how can I get on? And I'm like, I can volunteer this way, volunteer that way. I wanted to experience weightlessness. The only way to experience weightlessness without going in a rocket to orbit was on a parabolic flight. It's a flight that is basically a giant roller coaster, 50 degrees, nose up, push over the top. And as you're going over the top, you're going on a little bit of an arc of an orbit, and you're weightless for roughly 30 seconds. And try as I might, I couldn't make it happen. So I'm like, first question is like, if I want to do it that much, there must be a market. I'm going to start a company. So I went out and raised $500,000 and said, okay, what airplane should we use? How do we do this? And long story short, went one day to the FAA to figure out the process of getting approval to fly this parabolic arc, which NASA had been doing for the better part of 30, 40 years. And they were like, can't do it. I mean, what do you mean you can't do it? I was like, you can't, that's not allowed by the federal aviation regulations, the FARs. And I was like, I don't understand. I mean, can't do it does not compute. And they said, well, you can't take people out of the airplane, out of their chairs, and if you're aerobatic flight, you'll have to have them wear parachutes, but you can't charge for this. And I was like, no, you don't understand. We're living in America. So the first thing I ended up doing was with another friend, Eric Anderson. We went to Russia and we built a business using Russian airplanes and taking wealthy businessmen to Zhukovsky Air Force Base and doing parabolic flights there, and continued to fight the battle in the US. And I remember On my second and third, it's like, okay, it's not a matter of can't. It's like, how can you make this work? I remember coming up with an idea that I was going to start the religion of Zog, zero G. It was going to be your religious right to experience weightlessness. I mean, and I had this conversation with some of the FA leadership. I said, you're going to retire or die before I give up, which was the attitude I took on this. And then finally, the question was, who has the authority to say yes? Because a lot of times when you get no, 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 it's people covering their ass and they just don't have the authority to say yes. And ultimately, it was going to the head of the FAA, Marion Blakey, the FAA administrator, an amazing woman, who, I explained the situation to her, and she said, well, now, we can't just have American businessmen going to Moscow to fly in zero G. We got to figure out a way to do this. And so when she said, make it happen, everybody said, okay. And she did. And we began operations in October of 2004, a decade later. Actually, 11 years. I like to say it was an overnight success after 11 years of hard work. And then the next interesting moment of questioning was a couple years later. The X Prize was won in that same time period, and I found myself on the phone with Stephen Hawking, with his assistants and his nurses and his computer, and Professor Hawking asked, "Can you fly me to orbit? Can you fly me to space?" And I said, "No, but I could fly you on a zero G flight if you want." And he said, "Yes, I would love that." And so I said, okay, let's turn this into a fundraiser for ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, which he had. And let's announce this thing. I mean, I'm starving for publicity to promote this company, and this is fantastic. So I announce our intention to fly Professor Hawking, the world's expert in gravity, into zero gravity. And we get news, amazing news coverage for that announcement. I get 2 phone calls. One phone call is from our aircraft operating partner who said, "You're insane. You're going to kill the world's most famous physicist and destroy everything you worked on." The second call was from the FAA saying, "You can't do it." I'm like, "We're back to this? You can't do it?" And they said, "What do you mean you can't do it?" I said, "Well, in your operating specifications, which govern your flight authority and the FAA, it says you can only fly able-bodied people. And clearly, Professor Hawking is not able-bodied." And then I had the presence of mind to ask one key question, which was, who determines whether he's able-bodied? And the head of operations, FAA, stopped and said, "Well, I guess it would be his doctor or aerospace doctors." I said, "Great." I bought malpractice insurance, got letters from 3 or 4 physicians saying, yes, Professor Hawking is able-bodied to fly in zero G. And we ended up doing the flight, and it was an amazing, amazing experience.
That's incredible. One of the things that obviously we've lost him, and one of the things that you fight for is longevity. Obviously, their abundance and optimism and mindset is one of the only reasons anyone would ever want longevity. Where do you feel like we're at in the longevity? I know you talk about sort of escape velocity for longevity. Tell us a little bit about that and where you think we're at and where we're heading.
Sure. So I'll bring it back to when I was in medical school. I remember seeing a television show on long-lived sea life. That species of whales, like the bowhead whale, could live 200 years, and the Greenland shark could live 400 or 500 years. And I remember thinking to myself, if they can live that long, why can't we? I mean, it's a innocent question. And I remember thinking, okay, it's either a hardware problem or a software problem, and we're going to be able to solve that problem. And so I set out on a journey, which really picked up with intensity a decade ago. Because my first journeys, as we discussed, were in space, and then on with Singularity and X Prize, sort of focusing on the grand challenges. But a decade ago, I guess it had to do with turning 50. I'm 62 now. I began a journey to explore human longevity. I said, listen, it's probably the biggest marketplace on the planet. And the question is, are we at a point now where we can start to modify hardware and software to get us there? And we weren't there, 12 years ago, but we are there now. We're at a point this decade, the next 5 to 10 years, that I believe we're going to have the tools and capabilities to understand why we age, how to slow it, stop it, perhaps reverse it. And I've been doing a number of things personally, but in the business world to move us expeditiously there. So just to rattle them off, and we can decide where we want to go. My venture fund, Bold Capital, which is now $600-700 million, is 2/3 focused on longevity and health tech, right? So we've skewed in that direction. The second thing is I built a number of companies in the health tech longevity space. One of which is Fountain Life, which is probably the most advanced diagnostics and therapeutics company. We can talk about what we're doing there. A company called Vaccinity that's re-engineering vaccines against Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, hypercholesteremia, bone loss, muscle loss. A company called Cellularity, which is a stem cell company. And then written a couple of books, one with Tony Robbins called Life Force, and then very recently, this book on over my shoulder here called Longevity, the Practical Playbook, Your Practical Playbook, which is an outline of like where things going and what you can do right now. And there's a lot you can do right now. But to go
Yeah, let's
back,
talk about that because I think that's where people get confused. Like, what I want the technology, but what can I do now?
yeah, and let me mention first why you should do something now, right? I talked about mindsets a little bit ago, and there is a longevity mindset. And that longevity mindset for me is I believe that we're about to hit an inflection point, and we're going to be able to add decades onto your health, not your life, to your health, so that you have the vibrancy, the energy, the aesthetics, the cognition, the mobility to enjoy life. And your job is to stay around long enough to intercept those breakthroughs, but you're confident they're coming, and that's a longevity mindset. And you mentioned the idea of longevity, escape velocity, and that's really, I think, one of the key elements. So today, for every year that you're alive, science is extending. There are breakthroughs that extend your life like a quarter to a third of the year. There's going to be a point in time where for every year that you're alive, science is extending your life for more than a year. And that is longevity, escape velocity, a departure that allows you to then live, you know, I don't want to talk about immortality. That's not the idea here, but why not intend to make it north of 100 or 120 or 150? If you love life, right? So what do you do now? And when I wrote Life Force with Tony, it's a 700-page book. It's amazing, but it's a 700-page book, and people typically don't read 700-page books. So I decided to put out, well, what happened was people started saying, well, what are you doing for yourself, Peter? And I start with a 5-page Word document. It grew to 10 pages, 20 pages, 30 pages, 40 pages. And all of a sudden I was like, okay, I am going to turn this into the Reader's Digest version of that 700-page book. And this is what I do. And I broke it up into a chapter on diet, on sleep, on exercise, on mindset, on meds and supplements, and on not dying from something stupid. And then I had a colleague of mine, Dr. Helen Messier, write a chapter on women's health to complement it. And the book's 120 pages, and it's a how-to manual, and it's very prescriptive, but with the realization that there's nothing that's absolutely true for everybody all the time. But there are certain things which are true for the majority of people. And so on the diet side right now, let's go there. I am clear and give the evidence that sugar is a poison. It's a neuroinflammatory, a cardiovascular inflammatory, just a general inflammatory. We were never evolved to eat as much sugar or high glycemic index foods. And so cutting that out of your diet to the maximum extent possible. Even the order in which you eat your foods, like eat your veggies first. That slows down the motility, slows down spiking of insulin levels. Then eat your protein, And if you're going to eat any carbs, bread, pasta, whatever, eat that last on your dinner plate, right? When you're at a restaurant and the wine and bread get served, ask them to bring it back with the food, not like spike your blood sugar at the very beginning, which causes you to have more hunger, overeat your food. There are things like that, right? Whole plants, eating colorful vegetables. I mean, there's certain things where if you train your mind and you eat in a different fashion, I eat 150 grams of protein a day, right? A gram per pound of body weight, because I'm focused on maintaining and growing my muscle mass. I set a goal last year of adding 10 pounds of muscle, which I did. And my goal now is to maintain that, right? And the next part is exercise. So for me, it's working out in the gym at least 4 days a week, with lifting weights and getting on my techno gym bike over there. I take my Zoom calls there. I was thinking about taking this podcast from the bike, but I decided not to. And getting in 45 minutes of zone 2 training at least 3 times a week to stimulate my mitochondria. Um, so exercise is fundamental and key. And it doesn't, if you're over 60, which I am, it is the number one thing for longevity, bar none. Cutting back your chance of cancer by threefold and all-cause mortality um, by an equal amount. And so sleep is key. Unfortunately, I was on Zoom presenting to Tony's Platinum group last night till 1 a.m. in the morning. I usually am asleep at 9:30. And, one of the things, if you want to get 8 hours of sleep, and that's what our body needs, you need to be consistent about when you go to sleep. That's probably the most important thing, because your body typically wakes up at the same time. And for me, it's getting 8 hours of sleep, which I ascribe to. And then meds and supplements really depend on your biology, physiology. But the last thing, um, which I'll dive into, is not dying from something stupid. And it's meant to be quippy, but what does it mean? So it turns out that our bodies, Nick, are really great at hiding disease. Um, if I asked you, are you are you sure there's nothing going on inside your body that you don't know about? Unless you've just been checked, chances are you don't, and none of us do. Which is why I get a full body upload at Fountain Life every year. And I go and I spend a day, and I have a full body MRI, brain vasculature, coronary CT with an AI overlay, a DEXA scan, genomics, metabolomics, 120 blood biomarkers. All of this data, 150 gigabytes of data, are intended to answer two questions. Is there anything going on in my body right now I need to know about? And then what is it and how do I fix it? And catching it at the beginning. Or what's likely to get me and how do I fine tune to avoid that happening to me? And at the end of the day, our body is great at hiding disease. You don't feel cancer until it's a stage 3 or stage 4. 70% of heart attacks have no precedent, no shortness of breath, no pain, no nothing. And half of those heart attacks end up with you dying. It's the first symptom is you croak. Um, so how do you find out? Well, you have to look, and people go, I don't want to know. And I go, bullshit, you're going to know. Do you want to know now? We can do something about it, or later when it's too late. So for me, that advanced diagnostics are one of the current miracles for extending your health.
One of the things there that obviously, I recommend anyone who can afford to go to Fountain Life. There's some people who I'm sure listen to this who are just trying to pay their bills, right? And that's probably not on the radar. However, I was in a group of middle-aged men in my church the other day, and they were, lamenting how a close friend had, no previous symptoms, healthy, runs all the time, had just had a massive heart attack, like in their mid 40s. And I just had to remind them all, like, hey guys, that you could just go to the heart doctor, right? Like once a year, it's like not a bad idea to go get these things checked out or get your blood drawn once a year. Like there's some simple things that can even they're not as good, but can help. People just don't even do the basics.
Yeah. Well, let me double click on that a second. So, many people listening probably have heard of a calcium score. There's a lot of publicity on calcium scores. It's like you go do a coronary CT, right? This is a something that looks at the calcium in your coronary vessels, the blood vessels that feed the heart muscle tissue. And you get a calcium score. Now, if your heart vessel is blocked, that's a bad thing. But if you have calcium lining the sides, the walls of your coronary vessels, that calcium is stable and it's not going anyplace. Um, you can have a heart attack with a calcium score of 0. And what it turns out is that it's not the calcified plaque in your heart that will kill you. It's the uncalcified plaque. It's the soft plaque that can build up in the wall of the artery and evulse and literally block the artery. And that's what causes a widowmaker, and the person dies in their sleep. Uh, so up until recently, it was not possible to image that. But now, and this is what we do at Fountain Life, we use an AI technology called Clearly that's able to very specifically image the soft plaque and measure how much you have. And then there are protocols to either get rid of that soft plaque or to get it calcified so that it's stabilized. And that's, the tech is there. And needs to be knowledgeable about it. I had a friend of mine who went through Fountain Life 2 months ago, a friend of Tony's as well, and discovered 2 brain aneurysms. And, totally shocking. Has the top doctors in the world, but had not looked. And he was in surgery a week later, and then back at work a week after that. But that ticking time bomb has now been dealt with. It's the amount of stuff we don't know. Now, going back to the price, yes, it's not cheap, right? There's a 10K version and a 20K version of the Fountain Life offering. But we are rolling out right now a 3K digital version, and there is something called Fountain Benefits, Fountain Health Benefits, which will be for employers, which is free to the employee, and it's a benefits plan for the employers to offer to their employees. I think you pay for it eventually, one way or another. Yeah,
You do.
yeah,
Somebody does, no matter what.
yeah.
Yes, and also, I know you're a big fan of democratizing healthcare, trying to bring those costs down. Technology is ultimately what's going to do that, but at this point, it's still not affordable to everybody, obviously.
Yeah, and it will. We are in a field that is demonetizing and democratizing, right? The fact that all of us have access to incredible artificial intelligence technologies that would have been a national secret and unquestionably unaffordable 20 years ago, or 10 years ago, and is now effectively free to everybody. That's amazing.
That is mind blowing. One of the things I think is interesting you talked about. I just learned about this. I'm mid 40s, trying to make sure that I get to look like you, and I'm early 60s, and but I wasn't really familiar. I've been running, I've been lifting, I've been running. I run about 5 miles a day for the last 10 years. I actually got a calcium score of 0, which I was pretty proud of, but I'm not as proud because I guess it doesn't matter as much. But
It really, you need to go and look at the soft plaque. It really is
I,
critically important.
I'm going to do that now, but I didn't know about heart rate zone 2 training.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that. You mentioned it is 45 minutes, 4 times a week. I think you said, talk about that and what that is and why it's important.
So what you want to do, your body at a cellular level is dependent upon your mitochondria as the power plants of your body, right? It is purely energy, cognitive energy. It is physical energy. It is the desire and ability to get out of bed. It's everything. Without that vitality and that energy, it's like you don't want to live long. Um,
Right.
so, how do you stimulate your mitochondria to grow, to uh, replace themselves, and to be vibrant? And what you want to do is get into a what's called a zone 2, and it's a certain heart rate. And typically, it's a heart rate. If you wanted to estimate, for me, it's like 110 to 120 beats per minute. And it's a heart rate that is, if you're doing a slow jog or a bike ride, you can have a conversation, but it's kind of a little bit
Breathy.
burdensome to have a conversation, right? It's like
Yeah.
you're sort of like, at that kind of a level. And so getting there, and I think, I strive for 3 times a week. If I can get 4, that's great. But the way I do it is I take my Zoom calls. Like right after this, I've got a Zoom call with a recruiter, and I'll take it on the bike. And uh, you know, the old adage that sitting is the new smoking um, is true. Sitting on your butt all day long and taking Zoom call after Zoom call will kill you. So why not either take it walking or take it on a treadmill desk? Right, there are lots of great treadmill desks out there, or on a gym on a bike, and get the exercise, get your heart rate up while you're having the conversation.
Makes total sense. Yeah, one of the things that I find interesting about it is you guys, you can look up, there's formulas to calculate the zone,
Yeah, it's
zone
real.
two
It's
heart
really
rate.
easy. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously it's better if you do it. My understanding with like a full VO2 max, like full understanding, but you can calculate it roughly within your age frame, right?
Yep. Yep. It's
Yeah, and one of the things I think is also interesting is like it's if you do a lot of exercise, or like me, you've been running for years, it's actually a lot slower than you think.
yeah.
It actually, you have to slow yourself down, and I'm in sort of in the early stages of my understanding is you actually can sort of retrain your heart, and then you can actually you can stay at lower heart rates and be more efficient and higher level workouts as well.
Yes. Yeah. It is slower than you expect it to be. So maintaining it for 45 minutes is not a problem. It's scheduling the time to do it that is typically the problem.
That is. I'm actually this morning I did mine, and I just got into the new Walter Isaacson Elon Musk book, which is, I know you and Elon are close to fascinating stuff
Yeah.
that I did not know about him. You mentioned sugar. I think, look, one of the hardest things for many of us is to, number one, admit to ourselves that a lot of the things that we've learned over time are not true. I think we have to break these really hard formed, calcified, if you will, bonds that we that things we were told at some point in our life, they do change. Science does get better. We do learn more. We do learn, for instance, like whole eggs are good for you. You shouldn't just eat the egg white,
Yes.
all these things. So we got to be willing to be flexible and, do your due diligence and do your research. But when we hear these things, and then we also hear things that go against essentially what we've done in our entire lives. I mean, I'm 44, like I said. I don't know if there's been a day in my life where I've ever not had any sugar, right? I mean, just some amount of sugar. It's just in everything. So how do you recommend we start looking at that? Obviously, if you're super motivated, you can remove anything from your diet. But what's a practical way to start looking at sugar without people going, "Oh my God, not doing it. I can't even look at that. Sugar's and everything."
So it is true, and I fault the food companies and the FDA or whoever governs what's in our foods these days. Um, yeah, there should be a black box warning on kids cereal. The fact that Captain Crunch and Apple Jacks and all of these cereals that we munch in the morning is considered breakfast and a healthy, with 8 essential vitamins and minerals. I mean, what bullshit. I mean, it's like you're starting your day off in the absolute wrong direction. It is possible to minimize sugar in your life. It is becoming conscious of it. So I've effectively done that. One of the things I do inside my abundance community, Nick, as you know, is twice a year, once right after the Abundance 360 Summit every March, and then after my Abundance Platinum longevity trips in the fall, I work with Dr. Guillermo Navarrete to do a 22-day no sugar fast. And what does that mean? It means that we have a group of typically 100, 200 people in a WhatsApp group, and we share potential menus, but people share images of what they're eating. And what it looks like is really getting rid of sugar, getting rid of high glycemic index foods, and focusing in on veggies and proteins. So I love vegetables now. I've trained my mind. It's like I attack broccoli and asparagus and Brussels sprouts. Like it's like I just attack that food first. and then I'm typically mostly fish, some chicken, and I don't eat bread. I've gotten rid of gluten in my diet. Uh, but if you look at the label, you have to skip the bullshit on the front, which is marketing language. And if you look at the label for a particular product, which I do, um, it's in order of mass or percent uh, by composition. And most of the stuff out there that you think of as healthy is like this form of sugar and this form of sugar and this form of sugar and then something else. Um, and listen, sugar is very addictive, and you need to just figure out how to change your diet. So I use for breakfast I'll have a cachava, which is a plant-based protein shake, right? Which will give me 25 grams of protein. I have a product that Dr. Navarrete produces called Nutra 11, which is a hot chocolate protein drink with monk fruit as the sweetener, which has zero sugar. It tastes amazing, and I use it all the time. And then, I have a piece of fish for lunch, and fish or chicken, and a lot of veggies for dinner. And I, after time, I don't miss it. Now, it doesn't mean I don't eat any sugar. It means when I do, I'm very
It's conscious.
intentional. I'm very intentional. It's like I'm going to eat 2 squares of dark chocolate. I'm going to think about them and enjoy them. On my kid's birthdays, of course, I'll have a little bit of the birthday cake. But it used to be that I did mindless eating, right? Where just shoveling stuff in your mouth. And I don't do that anymore. I respect my body the same way that I monitor what goes into my mind. I'm careful about what I put in my body.
I love it. Yeah. Well, you mentioned, so 25 grams of protein, like 150 grams of protein. I started looking at my protein intake too. Like that's a lot of protein.
It is.
You actually have to change quite a bit to get to that much protein. And it's hard to eat with just like with meats.
Yes.
That's just too much food.
So, and the other thing is you can't eat it at one sitting. You can't really take in more than 25 grams at a time and have it digested. So one of the things I used to do intermittent fasting, I don't now. I do a 12-hour fast from like 7 p.m. till 7 a.m., but I don't. I used to go, 18 hours off. I'd eat lunch at 1 and dinner at 6, and then I wouldn't eat till 1 the next day. But it doesn't allow me to get the protein in I need. And the numbers, if you're in good health, turns out intermittent fasting really doesn't do that much. If you need to lose weight, it does. And so I've shifted to high protein intake in the morning. So I have my shake. I'll get a Nutra 11 between there and lunch. At lunch, I may have another protein shake. I may have fish, and then a protein snack in the afternoon, and then a dinner. And I'll get my 150 grams in that way. In my book, Longevity Practical Playbook, I give, for example, the amount of protein and carbs and fats and so forth I'll take in, and I've designed it and for consistency. Now, listen, I'm boring in a lot of ways. What can I say about that? I wear like this black shirt and a black T-shirt, and jeans, and that's like my standard fare. And the foods I eat, I actually enjoy them, but I repeat them like almost every day. But it's for me. There are other varieties you can do.
There are ways to. Yes, I wear black shirt, black jeans, and tennis shoes every day, and it makes, as we both know from studying many smart people, it makes decision fatigue. It doesn't start with clothing. It's a good place to start. But hey, I like certain style and fashion as well. So you got to pick your battles. Last thing, Peter, let's talk about a little bit. You founded the X Prize. The X Prize is a community of philanthropists and innovators who are dedicated to solving the world's biggest problems through challenges. The basics for everybody is basically prize money. The X Prize finds sponsors and donors. I was on the board for years. I had a blast.
And thank you for your support, Nick, of X Prize.
Of course, man. I'll be back. And to put together prize money. And the coolest part about it to me is that the amount of money spent to win the prize is a multiple of what the prize is, and nobody wins the prize if they don't solve the problem. So it's a really efficient way of problem solving. What's the X Prize tackling now? What are you after?
So thank you for that intro. We have launched about $500 million of prizes, which just blows my mind because my first X Prize was 10 million for space flight, and it took me 5 years to raise that $10 million. And like you said, we'll put out a challenge to the world. And the message is, don't care who you are, where you went to school, what you've ever done. If you solve this problem, you win. And this is not a business plan competition. It isn't a white paper competition. You actually have to physically build and demonstrate the tech, right? And then hopefully it launches an industry on the back end of that. So last year, 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, we launched a $100 million prize that I got Elon to fund on carbon removal, large-scale gigaton carbon removal. And we expect that to be won in the next 18 months. Next prize we launched was an $11 million prize for, sorry, $11 million prize for wildfires. And, being in LA and having all these wildfires is like, this is insane that we're being evacuated all the time. I mean, these wildfires become conflagrations because they're not stopped at inception. So it's like, why aren't we creating a means to find a prize like at the very beginning when it's like a spark, So this X Prize says to teams, listen, you have to monitor 1,000 square acres, and you have to build the ability to monitor that area of land. And if there is a fire started that's 2 meters or larger, or a fire that's moving, you have to put it out autonomously within 10 minutes, right? And if that were to occur, every time it jumped up, you'd smother it. It's like, when's the best time to stop a wildfire? At inception. Just like the same thing, when's the best time to find cancer? It's at the very beginning. So that prize got launched. We've just launched a prize that I'm super proud of. It took me 5-6 years to get the funding. It's a $101 million health span X Prize. And this health span prize is asking teams to develop a therapeutic that can restore muscle, immune, and cognition by as much of 20 years. So it's basically making you younger in those 3 domains. And it's 101 million because Chip Wilson, the founder of Lululemon, who put up the first 30 plus million, wanted it to be bigger than Elon's $100 million prize. So I said, okay, would you put in the extra million? He said, sure. And that it's funded out of Revolution, out of Saudi, which put up 40 million to complement Chip, and then a number of individuals who put in, anywhere from 2 to 10 million. I'm a major contributor to this prize as well. I think it's one of the most important things we can do, because while we've extended our lifespan and we have people routinely living to 100 or over 100, centenarians and super centenarians, we haven't extended our health span so that you feel good when you're living that old. And so the goal of this prize is to deliver back health, cognition, so you've got clarity of mind, muscle, so you're able to move around, climb the stairs, play with your great-great-grandkids, and your immune function so that you can fight disease and fight cancer, right? So that's there. We're about to launch another prize with Google in the quantum algorithm space, and then a big prize coming out of the Middle East related to water. So I'll tell you, one of the prizes I'm working on, and I really want to move forward, is a prize related to the I'll pick a different word, the destruction of truth. So the idea here is, can there be an X Prize for being able to tell whether a piece of data is factual, opinion, or disinformation? Like, where are you in that spectrum, right? And so AI for truth, so to speak, as an X Prize is what I'm been just really trying to think through over the last few months.
I look forward to seeing that as well. Actually, you and I were both quoted recently in a Success Magazine article about AI. And one of the things that I talked about, especially from the entertainment space, is, I feel like very shortly, and we need to be there already. There's just not a gold standard, but, communication coming particularly from celebrities and people in the entertainment space, but from everyone now, just like sports memorabilia, if it's not authenticated, you should just automatically assume it's not real. And I can't wait till we get to that point with human communication. So it's authenticated or it's not.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? We have had for most of human history a seeing is believing, right? We default to believing something. It may well be soon that our default status is disbelief. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it would make sense actually at this point. So I'm glad you and others are working on that. Peter, we could talk for hours, but I know you have to go and do other things. What is the best place for people to keep up with what you're working on?
Sure. If you like podcasts, my podcast is called Moonshots, and I'm really interviewing moonshot entrepreneurs to learn how they do what they do, what's the big vision they have, what have they learned that they can pass along. If you want access to the longevity work I'm doing, go to diamandis.com/longevity. I put out 2 blogs a week. My CEO summit called Abundance 360, so abundance360.com. And then if you're interested in Fountain Life, check it out at fountainlife.com. We save lives. I think that should be our new tagline, Fountain Life, we save lives. My tagline there is making 100 years old and you 60, but what the heck.
Excellent. Well, you do all the things, and I appreciate it, Peter. Great to have you. Thanks so much for joining me, and we will see you guys next time on Question Able. Take care.
A pleasure, Nick. Good to see you.